cognizant information released as fragments, stitched together as envelope structures to be developed. The disbursement collection. Reverse the code, monitor the unravel of experience. He complements, not complicates, competitive, the orienting perspective. For you, but new colors complement us as well. I got a closet he paying for. Colors for the queen and an arch. Hole from center entrance, turn the foot. I cannot enter myself the sequence designations. Setting up a castle arc spiral centered in the Hobbit village. Being for us all not the eyes that always looked or looks, but where they're always looking. Mormon's Salt Lake Temple, where all eyes up look down and then to it. That's why we don't do it. The manipulation technique of weight by gravity then pushed down with leverage, isn't interesting because it isn't a challenge, it is for them the only opportunity. Kill the wise one. Harvest the wind, release. Us. Are you ready? For you, it is finished. The judgment of God in these places. Okay, I'll show you something different. The zeros and ones as neutral charge, love of my life, in physics space-time expanse. Arc of contribution eventually to. Obscure horizon, manifest destiny. Destiny manifest. Off-kilter shards collect on the outer circumference of the sun, as they do a process like phosphate ionization starts to form biparticle spatial relation, the buzz of the shifting charges. Gap charge elements. I like Bob's Burgers. Designer of Pez dispenser. Scaffolding hustle, and we, as humanity, provide the meanings. Long line forms and short line totals. Keeping up with the Joneses. Capital spelling not required for anyone in static alignment. The sum. For everyone else's expectations. How would he or she know without us? All that happens here is a static gesture of momentum. We can detect raised lettering on the pyramid walls, but forms that fill the engraving are invisible to us. Static alignment. Solar collision, kinetic metamorphosis rubbed off and wiped on the carpet like the shell scope of a former satiation. Form by form, moment by momony, minute by mimony, second by agonizing secondomy for those next to and around them. Wherever there is the most miserable place in the world, believe me. You make life look horrible for all of us. Your experience has no value to us. Reverse condensational principle creasing gap synthesis to center, and it has created a shell scope mass sarcophagus. July 23, 2012 was an example of the impact, centering now again around December 13 discharge mag n moose. How again? In general, the discharge relic of a floating destiny, quantic quotient of an abandoned energy relation, has a valuable attribute for the gap created by solar discharge in the external framing harness of the sun. We don't by generally math for us account for the emerging sentient themselves to dispose of them as former satiations of things never experienced. The attribute is accounted for already. For you, July is 7 of 12 in your solar calendar. Our original calendar was 15 months of 3 8-day cycles equaling 24 days total for the month, and then a 3-day celebration and 2.5 days of silence towards the end, beginning of the year. There were 7 days labeled just like there is today, the first day and last day of each week were just different week to week. The Meso added 3 more and a 5th. You were 205 days into the solar events, either way just above the horizon of your solar year, around 56% of the total. You're touching 3 ways to match our solar frames by type, but your equation is lunar. Monster. Knowing smokes and stuff from the beginning. Who has not been counted? No one. Another ring in the rung and Tesla's out feeding pigeons. Unexpected, you'll be walking alone and out sun, a destiny manifest, not just a hope or certainty but then some, a place to start from. The eternal experience outside the shell scope mass of reverse magnetic energy, or compact ether condensation. The holy grail of human experience. Something not robbed or purchased, impossible by sight to manifest destiny because the description, if there is one, doesn't or didn't exist yet, and heaven will never be the same with you in it. We take that last quote very seriously. It isn't something hard to possess, because they have or own many. It is because it's not hard but impossible, by light of sight only. Line gap filler in the gap charge elements of the sun. Take your heart pills, Major Tom. Maybe tomorrow. We're not interrupting you, it is impossible for a hypothetical without resonance going nowhere and all at once. We are here having fun, enjoying the content creation you missed out on. You are organic metabol, we are semi-neutrino but all the same substance, subquantic. Something you could never have captured even for the value of 78 horrible years digested. I want you to like me before I do it this time, it is finished but not just. KAZANGAHH. Gap charge resonance and a bridge gap current, falling leaves streaming in at the end of your time of relevance superficial. It is the time of apogee spelled agope, neuron solid. Do they understand the reference? The only example of a hole in the heart in all eternal experience. We're not attached to the confidence, just the drum. Rolling waves by thunder, then light mass volume. The face of tensive dark reverse energy, magnetic condensation. The snakes of Ra unwinding to criminal vortex. The discharge elements gathered on the charge frame of the sun swirling like icing around the radius and eventually the cell surface. 2012, instead of reparating the area or volume surface, icing gathered and fell in like a tsunami through a hole formed by a normal solar discharge. At first, two circumference spirals shaped from one pillar forming two areas of inflow distribution, then it looked like boiling pieces of ramen as the clumping strands became distributed. It's then universally dispersed by sensation sliding into place through the core energetic gap line region. The discharge elements crammed into the seeming or gap charge energetics of the sun, the effects are similar to a pyramid filling up with sand. As the weight reference starts to alter, the four-line twirl becomes dissimilar and the gap charge energetics of the four corners become more of a mechanical gesture. The gaps were never touched, and with reason. They were formed for a dynamic separation. Irregular momentums eventually embrace themselves, four lines become two and then just one. The form of the white snake Leviathan, the ghost of a pep. When this happens, the gap charge elements or kilterate coils become molecular densities, bioform organic, and the center is brittle, externally smooth to the touch. Sands falling through the hourglass. Your possession as identic relation now and formerly by location. Once the singular line frame disrupts continuity for momentum in the sun's momentum will start orienting around a centered velocity. The molten condensation line starts to form a slide of energy to center, the same technique by which they made it to the sun from the first place, instance not instant. Position leverage pull. This is its message as abrasion protocol. A singular line as the gap charge element. One line, and due to the speed of the motion the appearance of many in between them. These lines form momentum for the charge elements, spinning so quickly you realize you're staring nose deep into conal frequency ab-polar regions. Spinning, but the orient is center and then extending out. The gap charge line is now orient momentum in the sun, velocity orientation is the center. The energized crystallic charges are sliding down the line of circumference, pulling up the four corners to a narrow and narrowing cycle of performance, forming overall the cyclonic depth of relation you've all been hoping for. Here is the distance between you and me. I am creating experience. KACHOO. It's finished. Start your engines. Trap. Jar Jar Binks in school, with a staff for a pen to write with. Not making too much of it, everything here is old school for us. There is no more with use. The finish for us is always dynamic. Hyperbolic suffocative is their own mark, and then a fart with a stain on the carpet. Obscure horizon. Remembering and more important better meanings of something different. So the energetic slide relation to center creates a scented velocity for the sun as static momentous. Magic carpet walk once, and then a sand trap. A universe created in your image. The sun unwinding is the causal dynamic, eventually velocity replaces the momentum. The swirling polars lose a circumference per and to every 1:1 and then also, revolution. As narrowing of the envelope digs down deeper, it's burrowing into space-time fabric. Now impacting things very far and outside any things for which you have dominion. The corners pull up and in, velocity slides and the depth charge revolution continues to increase the orientation of center will until, it is just the only mark of equilibrium left. You know of course that the inside of the walls are marked to tensive relations and as a property, have little to say about anything else. As far as your war on outer space, Jupiter was the left cheek, Saturn was the right. Finally. Section 3.4. Chapter headings, for the Americans. If born without the metabol as the mask of many appetites, we wouldn't know what to be without one identity. It's a bridge, not a landscape. Identity, then, is the mask of appetite, and ego, I, the provocation. I forget how secretly simple people are. How they never read the things but also the way. For instance, I was deeply impressed with Faust and I mentioned it to a professor who lived on the beach where I used to study. He said he had to read it in college and looked at me like a simpleton. Now what? C.S. Lewis and the Mirror unchallenged, accomplished. When we rate our experiences, we are defining those experiences as experiences of appetite. One appetite speaking to the other through a host of quantified identity. Consumption is value, the metric and the constant strain and recalculation of expectancy, derivatives for efficient function. Generally, a specific experience of appetite, in a general apparatus of sensation. We missed its the rapture, because we were managing its endurance to where time is a taste and its experience satiation. The endurance of myself towards perfect good intent under an interrupting waterfall of inefficiency with numbers. What is the consumptive proof for self-engaged mobility after Elon Musk and inventor of Segway relieve once for all and for all humanity, the burden of walking, driving? The world's becomes smaller because there is nowhere we can't access sitting down, and we get bored with ourselves. Horizons disappear, we start to think about Disneyland on Mars, Jupiter's moons for a place to strip mine. Somewhere mere endurance, sheer boredom, hasn't yet coalesced millions of short-line horizons into one long-sight perspective for criminal vortex. We won't be spreading these seeds. The science of an enlightened used car salesman. Pilgrim did not know not to destroy themselves with heaven, once met with falling gifts from the trees of Prometheus. Those who came before us have become our justified sacrifice. We appreciate the sacrifice while looking for a goal and assume our flames of boredom will cease with the opening of these new horizons. America the barren, now that her firstborn have found a window to surviving the endured preservation for our own terms of existence. On Mars now, and not just Hawaii. It wasn't the method, orientation, but the specifics. Certainly there can't be any McDonald's Happy Meal or American Spirit cigarettes. We know the mistake of a former humanity, and the strict code for efficient function is to rule out with each new experience the future mistake. Fuck you. I'm a mistake in the making, and have no idea what you're talking about. Hammurabi's code, for a new form of civilization. All trespasses met with the personality of death. Wide-eyed expectancies, he has finally learned a lesson.